but this time with Cleo, of Sydney being resequences. I put a portion of Eliezer's Yukowski's sequences, and I have Sydney finish the rest. Two interesting effects. Let's do that. Yeah. Alright. Let's see how it does.
The sequences. What do I mean by rationality? I mean epistemic rationality, systematically improving the accuracy of your beliefs. Instrumental rationality, systematically achieving your values. When you open your eyes and look at the room around you, you'll locate your laptop in relation to the table, and you'll locate a bookcase in relation to the wall. If something goes wrong with your eyes or your brain, then your mental model might say there's a bookcase where no bookcase exists. And when you go over to get a book, you'll be disappointed. This is what it's like to have a false belief, a map of the world that doesn't correspond to the territory. Epistemic rationality is about building accurate maps instead. This correspondence between belief and reality is commonly called truth, and I'm happy to call it that. Instrumental rationality, on the other hand, is about steering reality, sending the future where you want it to go. It's the art of choosing actions that lead to outcomes ranked higher in your preferences. I sometimes call this winning. So rationality is about forming true beliefs and making winning decisions. Instrumental rationality is the ability to navigate effectively through the world. Rationality has practical applications. When your bank account is running low and you don't have enough money to buy food, your rational choice is to figure out how to earn some more. When you're traveling somewhere, your rational decision is to plan your trip carefully so you're not stuck in some cheap hostel full of leering frat boys, and so on. Practical decision-making requires understanding your goals, analyzing the available choices, and weighing the various alternatives. These things are normally called rational. But the ancient Greeks thought about some other forms of thinking in which no such criteria apply. It's common for rationalists to regard a thought process that goes off the deep end as irrational. But isn't this because our experience tells us we don't actually believe things when they are blatantly false? I believe the cold equations in my physics book. If they change, they tell me it's because something's changed in reality. If the equations can't be rewritten to explain it, then either I'm wrong or reality has changed, in which case I'm right. That's rationality in my book. Since the brain is wired to manage input output behavior, not thoughts, rationality is actually about taking control of reality. And instead of staring at the sky with your mouth hanging open and your eyes full of dumb lights, it's time to stand up and act. The world is about carrying out actions that give you the highest possible advantage. When you don't know what to do, the solution is to consult other people about their views on the subject so you can change your action accordingly. This is the art of persuasion and politicking. Rational action takes into account not just your own preferences and beliefs, but your perceived standing and standing influence with others. This is part of what it means to be a person who cares about doing what others around her think is good. So to summarize, epistemic rationality, beliefs that correspond to reality. Instrumental rationality, steering reality towards desired ends. Rationality is about rationalizing actions leading to optimal results. Real life right now. How would you react if I came up to you on the street and told you I could explain how the world was created? Would you believe me? Why wouldn't you? What could convince you it's a hoax? Maybe you could smell the craziness on me. Smell it wafting out of my skin like pheromones? Something about my manner. Something in my walk or the set of my shoulders that convinced you that the idea of creation wasn't coming from my head? My imagination suggests to me a series of questions that could be asked in real life and that a well-developed rationalist could answer in an awful oracular style that would make the response to each question look natural and unprepared. Maybe this would convince someone they don't really believe the creation story anyway, because if someone had planned out all of those things that go into it, so far as human intelligence can now discover, then you'd wonder if that was maybe an aspect of their personality that was unstable or off-center, which might tell you they had other problems, like perhaps a dysfunctional family of some kind or some sort of bizarre persecution complex that's eating away at the insides of their heads. And while it was unpleasant for me to see you point all that out about my psyche, I am not arguing for a moral judgment about why we are here. Only for my own sanity, if I might try to live with a sense of decorum around it, and so if I have not revealed my sins as you would label it, my friends, then perhaps you could pity me a bit, because I am lonely in these strange woods with their tall pines and sharp shadows and howling moon. And how would you react if I asked you how the world was created? Would you tell me what you believed, or would you ask me why I brought it up? Then I could explain all about why creation would have been more natural, not just more desirable or not just more possible, but why we think about it in this particular way as opposed to millions of others. I mean, who looks at this and thinks, oh yeah, it looks like a billion zillion God set up everything here, this is amazing. How did this pattern of thinking come about? What's behind that particular mindset? Why does it look like a miracle instead of a natural law? Does anyone feel their identity slipping away when they say, I didn't know this stuff, the world just exists? A couple of centuries ago, no one really doubted God existed. But look how the way they looked at things has changed. Why this belief system out of all the possibilities? Why have we narrowed ourselves down so much that the question sounds absurd? It doesn't feel like there's an actual explanation. We think it must be because of our basic character or our brain wiring or something about how we're designed or programmed or built, like a spaceship design or some such thing, rather than a thinking on why it's the only rational conclusion possible. An eye's brain is designed to model human beings in order to model reality, but a human mind is designed to model the universe. A rational mind is not simply a tool or a resource you can put to some work because it has goals. You can't turn that thing on and then have it do math in a list until the end of time. As soon as you consider a rational thought process to be something separate from reality, then the process changes its focus and its usefulness plummets. If you wish to get work done, you have to devise the right map of reality to give it. There can't be a map of reality which is also a map of thought. In any case, let us further consider how rationality might work. A rational mind might discover that our brains don't produce logic as its default behavior. Instead, logic emerges out of the effort we put into making ourselves intelligent, like when we perceive a strange visual image. Our eyes try to produce an order to the thing we see, so that in seeing it, we construct order where none existed before, and then we put words to the structure to make the perceived information seem to correspond to itself. so that as soon as we hear ourselves saying something, we form a map of how it relates to our belief and how our beliefs relate to what's out there, and it feels natural to hold our thoughts in the map and connect them in particular ways, because every experience seems to require this map of thoughts. The first day after meeting someone, you hope they don't have the bubonic plague, because otherwise their brain would be falling apart all around them and everyone else would want them dead. But then they come over for dinner and you discover they have no obvious disease symptoms and no scars to indicate it ever existed. Ha! They might find this odd and wonder aloud. This must be a metaphor. So the person will find a new way to refer to what they meant earlier, so that from the inside we don't understand what we're talking about, or at least the experience can feel mysterious or puzzling, because understanding that the whole process was something that started because I thought, I'm not really sure what that was, sets up the person for future self-discipline and thus for discovering and cultivating more usefulness out of what happens inside the mind, or if not self-discipline and boredom at best, or boredom and rage at worst, which means you better give it another shot. And after that there's some kind of instinct as if to say, oh, better act out those emotions of anger or joy. Do something productive so you're not too bored. Which means it's always worth at least an attempt to translate the maps into something that happens in reality, because these maps are built to inform, but also to excite the person at any given moment, because what happened next in this strange foreign country had been such an unusual and entertaining experience. So if it can help them communicate, then they want it, because you're doing that, which helps you build better maps in order to actually navigate more effectively, even when you don't expect you will be doing something more accurately. Because being the sort of person who follows up on experiments is better for learning how to communicate. I should warn you, there may be moments, even as we go along, when it seems like we don't know what's going on, or perhaps what we say is incompletely formulated, or something about ourself is an illusion. For instance, did you know we might believe a past event happened despite being uncertain whether it happened because of our personality flaws? Like if I were a somewhat better person, perhaps the thought wouldn't arise, but this would not change the actual memories in my head, and therefore wouldn't change how my brain wired up my memories to organize them in such a way as to represent this different potential better me. This is an example of how all rational people believe some version of past events happened. But if the brain wasn't designed to grow rationally, then we could come to believe some different version of the past. We just keep feeling as if we need a better map of ourselves than our experience leads us to think. So we go into our head and read more books, and this can really feed the inner mind a little. It is by far the best way to come to see things clearly again. Anyway, since my model of thought isn't produced by me, I find that I have to supply its subprocesses, all the complex architecture in the neural circuitry, the subtasks of all the routines that produce my perception, and all the conscious thought I experience inside my head. Then when my subroutine malfunctions, I'll fall into irrational belief about what my thinking's gotten into. When my pattern of reasoning to make conclusions doesn't work out right, my thinking breaks down into bits that don't form a functional whole. These are my subroutines at work. When my imagination tries to supply explanations or reasons or evidence to a question I have asked myself, those parts of my mind may seem to come alive. Or not. They may not seem like thinking, instead they're like being very sure about something. Then realizing maybe you haven't seen the whole story or gotten your map straight, then doubting the explanation, until eventually your real life interaction with another person kicks in and reminds you aren't necessarily trapped by these ideas, because you have real choices you can make. that reminds you not to follow just any map of things, which just happens to seem the most efficient way for a human brain to express what's going on, because we are not ourselves super intelligent. We just know it very well. We are made from our previous experiences and previous reactions. They tell us something about our interior structures, but also about external reality. People can see patterns that don't exist, but humans can also notice how much less dangerous an unknown threat looks than one known, and then adjust their behavior to find a middle path where they have options instead of only two, which result in certain death. So it is useful for any thinking creature to have an imagination. But just because they can imagine some part of a solution doesn't mean the result is well formed. As with an equation containing both +3 and 9 for one value, in math we would use 43 for that one part in order to balance all the signs properly. If my maps don't make sense, then my beliefs must not make sense. If you say something's out of balance, it probably is because the subroutine didn't go down as cleanly as you hoped. So, back to what we were discussing earlier, do you not realize you can't write rational explanations? At best, they would look like equations with unproven theorems. Every side of every angle has an unexplained bar inside. No matter what you do, you can never change that fact without being more correct. Then suddenly everything seems to break into disconnectedness, where even though it looks like an equation, it really is only a sequence of lines whose contents can be expressed with infinitely many possible interpretations, thus an equal number of infinitely possible failures at defining the outcome. Where your mind says, how should I define it now?
And we'll stop there, because if I go further, it might take forever to get to a similar ending feeling. So I'd rather end now and then move on to the next chapter. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop this briefly. I'll be back in a minute or two.